Hi, my name is Rebecca Thompson Hitt. I'm the founder and executive director of the Consciously Parenting Project, and this is the Consciously Parenting Podcast. We're going to be talking with parenting visionaries, professionals, and parents to guide you and inspire you to be the most connected parent you can be. Today I'm talking with Tracy Cassels of Evolutionary Parenting. All right. Hi, Rebecca Thompson Hitt here, founder and executive director of the Consciously Parenting Project. And we're back with Tracy Cassels. Tracy, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you for having me again.
So we have been talking about attachment and not attachment parenting. We're talking about attachment. We're talking about the relationship, in this particular instance, about parent and child and what is healthy, not necessarily what is common, because that's a whole different thing, but what a healthy relationship is. And we've been talking about, a little bit about what attachment looks like. And today we're going to talk more about kind of day to day. What does it look like at different ages and stages of parenting, and we were talking a little bit before we started recording about the overbearing parent and what that might look like. And parents who aren't connected or, paying attention to their child's needs at all. So we're talking about that place in the middle, I think,
Yes.
of what is actually healthy, what helps promote healthy development in our children and in our relationships. So here we are.
Big topic.
It is a big topic. 20 minutes, go.
All right. I think I want to start off by first saying, I think what you touched on about what's normal but not necessarily common is really, really important to reiterate. We are a society that focuses on why can't you do what other people are doing? Mm-hmm. They look at other people as to what's going on and what they're doing to judge their own parenting behaviors and what's right. And I think whenever we do that, we have to take a step back, particularly with attachment. Most large-scale studies are now telling us that, it used to be around 70% of kids were securely attached, which I still find an abysmally low number. Mm-hmm. And now the latest large scale is 60%. And some studies are now getting as low as 50%. Mm-hmm. So when you think about looking to other people, that's probably not a good idea.
Right.
There's a point at which we have to say a lot of people are doing things kind of wrong if these are the numbers of secure attachment we're getting. So we really do want to differentiate between what is, normal from an attachment or biological perspective and what is culturally normal.
Right.
And I think what's culturally normal when people are pushing towards that is really proving to be not the best thing for attachment. So we really want to highlight that and start with people realizing that don't look to your neighbor to decide if what you're doing is right or wrong, because, you may be getting it 50-50 as to whether or not they're even engaging in attachment appropriate behavior.
Right.
So that's just my little preamble. So where do you want to start on the actual behaviors? Should we just go by ages here?
I think so. I think let's start at the beginning. And then I think that reassures parents, especially those who are investing a lot in the beginning right now. Those tend to be the parents who are looking at their neighbors and going, wow, I'm doing a whole lot more than, my neighbor. So, am I doing something wrong? Am I, everybody's kind of telling me I am, that I'm spending too much time, I'm putting in too much effort. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. Well, let's start off to one of the other things here is I think that really speaks to this big idea we have in our society about this overbearing parent leading to specifically anxious attachment. And I don't want to say that's not a thing. It is. Overbearing parents can create insecure attachments in their children. The issue is that overbearing parenting is not attachment parenting. It's not co-sleeping. It's not breastfeeding on demand. It's not being a stay-at-home parent. Overbearing is completely negating the desires of your child and subsuming your own on top of them. And it's really important that we remember that, because oftentimes when parents co-sleep, they don't co-sleep because, yay, this is what I want to do. Well, sometimes they do want to do it, but it's not my child hates it and I'm forcing them to do it.
Right.
That's overbearing.
Right.
It is simply, no, this really works for me and my child. My child gets, to nurse on demand much more easily. I get more sleep, and the dyad just works that way.
Right.
People often try and suggest that parents who breastfeed beyond a certain age, you must be doing it for yourself. As someone who has done that, no, trust me, I'm not.
Totally not about me.
It is. And I love the bond with my kids of nursing beyond, especially, what is culturally normal, and my daughter very much on the upper end, but it's not about me. Right. It is very much being responsive to some of the needs that my kids have had. And being lucky and blessed to be able to provide that particular need. So I think we really want to separate out here this overbearing from what is really biologically normative parenting. In terms of being proximal to your child and being very physically responsive to your child. So we really want to tease that out. So parents really shouldn't be worried about an anxious attachment because they co-sleep, because they breastfeed, because they stay at home, because all sorts of other things.
They carry their child.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
This is not overbearing parenting. This is most often responsive parenting. If your child's telling you, I don't want to sleep with you and I want my own bed, and you're like, damn it, no, that is overbearing. So
right. We must co-sleep.
Exactly. That's where you're getting into.
But
again,
I'm 12.
And some 12-year-olds will still want to co-sleep,
Absolutely.
right? This is, and when you look cross-culturally in many, tribal societies, that's actually still normal, especially for girls to still be co-sleeping at that age.
Yep.
So, this is not, it's about the individual child, and the responsiveness there. So with young children, with babies, I think we always start with, they are, people try and get you to say, oh, you should only respond at a certain time. You only respond to their cries, if they're not hungry, cold, etc. Our babies have nothing but needs.
Right.
They are truly at our whim. We really lay the foundation early on of telling them what kind of world they're in. And this is why attachment's so important, is that, it's malleable and we can change this throughout the years as events change and things happen, attachment patterns change, the way we view the world changes. But by and large, in the first couple of years, we have really set the stage for the way our kids are going to interact with the world. And the way we tell them whether it's safe, we tell them whether they can rely upon others, we tell them whether they're on their own. And all these things, from an evolutionary perspective, makes sense that we get to dictate this. If you're born into a war zone, your child needs to have a different set of survival skills than if they're born into an affluent country with, most everything at their disposal. So the way we interact with our kids actually informs the way they view the world. And that's really, really important for us to remember. So what we're providing them is this framework. And the more responsive we are to them, the more we're able to comfort them when they're upset and make them feel truly safe. We don't leave them to cry because we think that's the right thing to do. We actually are there to tell them, no, you are safe here. Then they actually view the world as a safe place that they can go and explore. And this is why we see secure attachment is so readily related to, how outgoing kids usually end up being, all else being equal, temperament, et cetera, and so on. So it's really important that we understand that young kids just have needs, and why one parent can have a securely attached kid without being always touching, always breastfeeding, always co-sleeping, and another requires that. That's just individual differences in temperament.
Right.
And so, it's not that because your neighbor doesn't co-sleep, they're not going to have a securely attached child. That's not the case. They may have a child that just has a different set of needs than your own based upon his or her temperament.
Right. And I've seen a lot of parents who've got one child who just is so intense and needs so much. And then it's usually the second one. The second one is just much more easygoing, still has needs, of course, but isn't as intense, doesn't need to be constantly nursing or constantly, being held or, and some of those parents begin to question, did I create this in my first child? And it's just those differences in that child.
And I think there's differences in the child. I think it's also, and this is my own personal opinion here, but I also sometimes think some of it is we do present our first kids often with a bit more anxiety than later kids.
That's very true.
And so they pick up on our anxiety and they're like, all right, I'm going to make sure I stay close because you seem unsure about this whole world thing. And that's what I mean by we're forming their view. The way we behave really tells them a lot about the world. Right. So when we leave them to cry, they don't pick up, oh, it's safe. They pick up, oh, I'm on my own. Okay. Right. And they can adapt. They may not, depending on other factors. But that really shapes their worldview. And so when we are anxious at the beginning and they pick up on that anxiety and they may be a bit more likely to say, okay, I'm going to try and stay closer because I think this world isn't quite as safe as it should be. Right. And by the time we have the second, you're so calm about it. They're like, oh, cool. All's good. I'm here.
Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's a bit of that interaction happening, both of temperament, because I've seen people who've had the first be really chill and the second be completely demanding. And they say, if my first was my second, I never would have had a second.
Right.
So you get it both ways. But I do sometimes think there's the parenting interaction in there as well with our comfort level with what we're doing.
Sure.
But yeah, so once you get beyond, infancy is really, I think, all about needs. It's meeting them. It's making sure our children feel safe in the world and not expecting them to logically feel safe. We say, oh, I'm leaving you alone and not responding because you're safe. That is not what your child takes from when you leave this. So it's really being clear about their level of understanding, of comprehension, et cetera, and what you can do with that. But I think the real hard part for parents and where they start wondering, overbearing, permissive, et cetera, is once you start seeing a lot of wants creeping in.
Right.
Our kids start wanting the chocolate chip cookies. They don't want to have a bath at bedtime. They want to stay up forever. And
they want the blue cup and not the red one.
Exactly. And so many parents struggle with where to set boundaries because we do know that, a secure attachment also comes making them feel safe, also means making them realize that we are there and have kind of a firm grasp on our surroundings. And when we are completely permissive and they run the show, it's actually very anxiety producing for them. Right. If they are left to make all decisions, it makes you seem like, well, I don't know what's good. And that's scary for a kid. They want to know that we know what's going on, but it doesn't mean we dictate their entire life. So often I see families that are setting boundaries that just don't make sense. They're setting boundaries for the sake of setting boundaries. And that impedes on kids' autonomy as well when they're trying to branch out, they're trying to make their own choices. And so I've always said to families, I view the best way to secure attachment is you're still responsive, obviously. That's the key. Across everything else is responsiveness. When your child is in distress, you are there. Being there does not mean giving in if they're upset because you said no to something.
Right.
It means being there. It means being empathic. It means sitting with them. It means letting them express their emotion and letting them know that their emotions are valid. And that's such an important piece that we really struggle with a lot. But then also knowing where to set the boundaries to make them feel safe. So I've always argued with people that, biological functions, we should never be setting strict boundaries on biological functions. You can't tell a child when they should be eating. You can present food at certain times and have it be open to them. But we don't do well. If someone sat down and said, no, it's 2:00. I don't care that you're not hungry. Eat. I would struggle with that.
Right.
You can have routines where you set up, if you're eating at the same time every day, their body will naturally fall into an eating and digestion rhythm at which they'll probably be hungry. But if you become forcibly putting this on them, that's not good either. Same with sleep. You want to make sleep conducive. But if someone said to you, lie down and go to sleep, and you weren't tired, you'd be like, yeah, get lost. And I think we have to remember, so those are boundaries where I find our society is very obsessive over biological boundaries. Yet I don't see that actually instills senses of safety or anything to our children. I think it's actually more confusing, and can result in a lot of conflict amongst parents and children. Boundaries really have to do with safety.
Right.
Making sure our kids are safe. And so, arguing over the blue cup or the red cup, why?
Right. It's not a safety issue.
Exactly. Let them pick their cup. Arguing over getting in the tub with the toaster. Well, yeah, you're not going to be like, well, good luck, kid, and let me know how it goes.
Right.
That is where you enforce the boundary. And sometimes there are things like, TV isn't inherently a safety issue as such, but yes, too much we know is detrimental. So it is an issue in which we step in and we make rules and regulations. So I always say, for me with families, you really need to be able to back up your reasoning. If you find yourself saying just because, or I said so, you really want to think about that boundary again. Is that helping your kid feel safe? Is it helping them? Is it possibly an area where they could learn some autonomy? And kind of going from there. So I think once you hit that, especially the toddler age and up, it's a slow, gradual process of you letting go of your control while also finding ways to maintain the really important boundaries and letting them grow in their independence.
And I think one of the things that you said I want to go back to, and that was the piece on the creating the space for the feelings that they're having, but not necessarily just saying, oh, well, yeah, here, have the cookie, because I think that I see so many parents struggle with this. And I think a lot of it is because we didn't necessarily experience somebody doing that for us. So we get into those positions and we're like, oh, what can I do to make you happy? And it's not about the lollipop. It's about creating the space for those feelings. Yes.
And I think one of the things there I recommend to all families. I love Dan Siegel's book, Parenting from the Inside Out, because it really touches on that issue of what you said of us not having gotten that care. And if we don't have that care, it's really hard for us to pass it on. And yet that's exactly what our kids need. So when we have the chance to actually just sit with ourselves and learn what triggers us, what makes us upset, what makes us want to be like, no, just stop. It's really discomfort on our behalf. And when we can sit with it and when we can actually take the time to just be like, you know what, it's okay for them to feel this. Right. It may be awkward if we're out in public and your kid's screaming, but that's life. If
that's
something
parenting.
And if something really horrible happened to you in public, you might find yourself. I've seen people after breakups crying in restaurants and out on the street, and you don't go up to them and say, hey, you know what? Get yourself in a car and go home.
Right.
We tend to feel like, oh, something really horrible must have just happened. And yet we don't extend that to children.
Right.
And that's what our kids need, is to have us there for them, allow them to feel that way, and tell them it's okay to feel that way. I remember many times I've said no to my daughter about stuff, and she's gotten furious and angry, and we've sat there and it's just, yeah, I know it sucks. And I'm here. You're not going to get it.
Right.
But you're allowed to feel upset about that. I don't need to make her feel like you can't be upset because you didn't get what you want. I'm upset if I can't get what I want.
Right.
Like, I may not cry the way she does because I have a greater sense of emotion regulation because of my age and development, but I still feel upset about it. Right. And I think it's really important that we allow our kids to feel that, and they need to know it's okay to feel that. Because that's another area of feeling safe. If you feel like your emotions are wrong or bad, you tend to not have control over them, and that can lead to great anxiety. And if the source of that anxiety is your parents, well, it's really hard to have a secure attachment that way.
Right.
So, yeah. So
I was thinking about just one more thing right there, because I think a lot of times parents look at what their child is upset about, and from their logical space, they can look at it and say, that's not a big deal. That wouldn't upset me. So why is it upsetting my child? They're not able to even put themselves in their child's position. And I love how you just phrase that with, there are things that, I don't get, that I can't have, that I'm disappointed about. So it might not be this very same thing. It might not be, the donut that you can't have, although it may be, but being able to shift yourself just a little bit to say, yeah, there are things for me that I do get upset about, even if it's not this very same thing. And I have a right to those feelings when I'm upset about something, and my child does too. So I think it's that shift is really important for parents, because we're in our logical brains often in those situations, and we're just looking at them going, not that big of a deal. Just move on.
We're not perspective taking. We're not taking their perspective of it. But you know what? Even when we do, I think it's hard. Like you said, I can say to myself, I have things I'm upset about. But I even catch myself sometimes, just stop being upset. That's so stupid that you're upset about it.
Right. Move on.
And that goes back to, our own upbringing and, a culture that we have that really dismisses negative emotion. We're not supposed to have it. Going even seriously, like I had a friend tell me when I miscarried before my daughter was born, and a friend who had miscarried said to me, you're going to get people that give you the, aren't you over it yet? Mm-hmm. And just forget them, to be the polite way of saying it.
That's right.
And I hit it. And I remember it was just like, really? I'm not even allowed to have a time. Like there's a time limit on this.
Right.
Like you get to be upset for your couple weeks, and then stop it. Right. You're making us all uncomfortable.
Right.
And so, you then give that, and I have the capacity to understand. I have my logical brain. My kids don't have that. Exactly. And so although I can look at their upsets and discomforts and realize, well, I wouldn't be upset about that. Well, other people wouldn't be upset about things I would be, but also they are lacking in many ways the capacity to view things through different lenses. And that's part of our job. When we talk about building up resiliency and emotion regulation and everything like that, it's helping them, view things in a different way. It's helping them find solutions, but not when they're in the midst of those emotional states.
Right.
It is completely useless to try and take a child who is upset and get them to see things differently.
Right.
Their brain is not there. They have to get through the emotion before they can actually start thinking about any other way of approaching it.
Mm-hmm. Right. And when we can be there while they move through those feelings, and they will, they don't stay in them forever.
Exactly.
Then they will come to a place where you can have a conversation. You can talk about, wow, that you were really upset. Let's talk about how that could have felt better for you.
What could you do next time?
Yeah.
And that also helps build attachment between you and your child, because not only are you, validating their experience, part of that attachment and responsiveness is that you're helping them, right? It's not just, wow, that sucked. Well, you're through it. Great. Okay.
Good job.
Yeah.
You did it all by yourself.
There you go. That's great. That's not the whole story.
Right.
So we do responsiveness, is being there. It's allowing them that space, but it is also helping them, giving them tools and helping them practice those tools, and understanding that, talking to your child once about what to do best or better next time, they're not going to do it next time.
No, just like
Probably
we
not
wouldn't.
The time after that. Or
just like as we are trying to shift in our parenting, we don't, even if we can come up with, next time we don't do it. It takes a long time to shift it.
Yes. And it just takes constant work and being there and being kind to ourselves and being kind to our kids.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. And the same kind of thing continues as our kids get older. My kids are 13 and 18. And while it's less day to day, moment to moment, oh wow, yeah, red cup. We're well past that now. But it's the same kind of supporting and being there. It just looks different because they're bigger. But being there when they are having a hard day and just listening and helping them just by being there, moving through their feelings, which now, that we've been practicing it for, a really long time. And some of that being me, I've been practicing this for a really long time. I can see my kids move through it. And then, it's the same kind of thing. Okay. Yeah. You got really upset there. And I was there. I was sitting with them while they were upset. And then we look at, all right, now where do you need to go? What do you need to do so that you can, complete this? And it's just like, it's that scaffolding that I've been building all this time, that we as parents build for our kids to handle the things that come up in their lives, but knowing that we're still there. It's not like, okay, you're 18. All right, you're an adult. Good luck.
Yeah. See you later.
It's not no. with an attachment, a secure attachment. I would hope at this point, it's the ability for him, my oldest, I'm talking about now, to move back into connection when he needs it, and then to be able to move back out into the world when he's ready.
And I think what's really important with that is the stage for that is often set, going back to the discussion on boundaries and safety.
Yeah.
When we want our kids to trust us and be there, that is dependent upon them trusting that we're being reasonable and trusting that we understand them. And that's why I say it's so important not to set boundaries for the sake of setting boundaries.
Right.
That's where we put up walls as our kids get older. Then all they see is us really not listening to them.
Right.
And if we're not listening to them, then they're not talking to us.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes all of it far more difficult, especially in years when you want that connection.
Right. Absolutely. And it's tricky for a lot of parents to figure out where is that place where we need a boundary, and and how can we put that boundary in effect, especially with teens, so that we stay in connection in that process. So it's not me being a dictator, but yet it's also me not just turning a blind eye to whatever is happening.
Yeah, you're not focusing on just being a friend.
Right.
You're focused on actually being a parent.
Mm-hmm.
And, and sometimes they won't like what it is. And I always think, the best way with that is to include children in the discussion.
Yeah.
Teens can say, look, this is my concern. How do you plan to address it? Okay, what is the compromise we can reach where I'm happy with your safety being concerned and you're feeling like you have some autonomy here?
Right.
And it doesn't...
It's that balance. It's that balance of giving and taking, and absolutely, because we're preparing them to go out into the world on their own so that they can reflect on these things for themselves.
Yes. And we don't want them going in just looking to the next person to tell them what to do.
Exactly.
We want them being able to stand up for themselves. We want them to think about their own behaviors, the consequences of their own behaviors before they engage in them. And that's what this is my concern comes into, is bringing up these potential consequences that they may not have considered before.
Right. I always think about how our kids' brains don't finish developing until much, much later than we think.
Yes.
We've got this idea that 18 is an adult. And yet it's really not from a brain perspective. And
no.
So, even though there's been a huge shift between 16 and 18 and my son and his ability to, think beyond and, look outside of the immediate in the way he did more when he was 15 or 16, there's such a big difference there, but he's still not an adult. He's still not completed in his development.
You know what? I'm not sure I'm completed in my development.
I'm pretty sure I'm not either.
But yeah, so I think it's just looking and giving them those opportunities to really connect with us while still maintaining the fact that we are their parents. We're not looking to be their best friend, and that's where the boundaries come in again.
Right.
And letting them be upset again. If we have to set a boundary that they don't like, they're allowed to be upset about it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And maybe sometimes we set a boundary and we look back and say, I messed up. Being able to apologize to them and acknowledge that is such an important thing when it comes to that secure relationship. Mm-hmm. Because then they do truly trust you when you come up with something. If they know you're going to apologize, they know you're not doing it just to take something away from them or harm them or anything like that. You're doing it because you truly believe it's best.
Right. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So.
Well, anything else that we should say before we close? I know this is such a big conversation. There's so many things huge one. Go.
I know. It's so huge. I think we've touched on the big points for people. I mean, obviously we want people to look more into this for their ages and stages and everything. Mm-hmm. But, I think it all comes back to perspective taking. If you're ever in doubt of a boundary you're setting or anything else like that, try and think about how you'd feel if someone was setting it with you. In a comparable area. Mm-hmm. And then, you can kind of decide, okay, this is okay. And it's hard for parents because we think, well, our kids are limited in their capacity. And that's why I would say it's like, okay, well, imagine you were doing something totally out of your own capacity, skydiving or something, if you've never done it. What rules and regulations would be fair to impose on you? And, how would you take it? And which would be unfair?
Right.
And so you just kind of try and take the closest equivalent we can get for our kids and then impose that way the boundaries that really do focus on the right thing.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Oh, thank you for that. And thank you so much for this conversation. And, attachment is such a big topic and there's so many aspects of it and it can be so confusing for parents. So I really appreciate you helping us to distill down the things that are really the most important about attachment. And so I'm very grateful for your time, for your expertise and for sharing that with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on and for doing this, because I think it is so important for parents to have a spot they can come and get appropriate size information that isn't overwhelming and isn't too simplistic either. So thank you for doing this for everyone, because it is such an important resource.
Yeah. So if you aren't familiar with Tracy's work, you can visit her website at evolutionaryparenting.com. I encourage you to do it. She's got so many great resources, and she often takes studies and tears them apart and looks at them and helps us to make sense of, this study that just said we should never do blah, 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 blah. And Tracy just does such a lovely, lovely job with that of helping us all to understand. So check out her work, check out her Facebook page. And, I so appreciate the work that you're doing in the world, Tracy. So thank you so much.
Oh, you too, Rebecca. Thank you so much.
All right. See you next time.
Okay. Bye.
For more information, please visit the Consciously Parenting website, consciouslyparenting.com. And if you love this episode, please share this episode. Thanks so much. See you next time.